Hi, my awesome viewer. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop your city and country in the comments. Whether it's a little village or a massive city, I want to know. And please remember to share this video. It really helps keep the channel alive. Let's jump right in. The hotel room phone rang twice before it was answered, the voice on the other end thick with sleep. I gripped the receiver tighter, drew a long breath, and spoke with cold precision. Detective Harris, Brookville Police Department. Is there a Mrs. Lauren Morris in that room? I asked, deliberately using my own last name. I wanted it to land like a punch. There was a pause, heavy and awkward. I could almost picture James Carter, once my closest friend, frozen in disbelief, mentally rewinding what he'd just heard. Yeah, hang on, he muttered, the sound of rustling sheets and shuffling footsteps filling the line. Then muffled, Lauren, it's the police. They're asking for you. My heart pounded like it was trying to escape my chest. My jaw was clenched so tight it sent pain up into my temples. Then her voice came, Lauren's, hesitant, uneasy, edged with confusion. This is Lauren speaking. That was the moment I dropped the act. My tone shifted, sickly sweet and sharp as glass. Hey there, Lauren, I said, voice falsely chipper. Or should I say good morning, darling? Did you sleep well in your boyfriend's bed? Silence. Daniel, she gasped, panic cutting through the name like a blade. Oh my God, Daniel? Her voice cracked on the second utterance, full of dread. I imagined her now, upright in the hotel bed, the blanket clutched to her chest like it could protect her from me. Bingo, I said, letting some of the fury leak through the mask of calm. Just thought I'd give you a little update. You'll want to listen close. James's voice mumbled something in the background. What's going on? But I didn't acknowledge it. Daniel, please, she began, but I steamrolled her words. First thing, I bit out. Don't bother coming home. I changed the locks yesterday. Your keys won't do you any good. I gave the silence a beat to sink in. The garage code? That's changed too. The house is no longer yours to walk into. I heard her inhale sharply, the kind of breath that comes from fear wrapped in shock. No. Wait, Daniel, you have to understand, she stammered through tears. But the pain twisting in my chest gave me clarity. Her excuses were meaningless now. You don't get to explain, I said, voice low and lethal. You stopped having that right the moment you lied to me. My tone was a blade. Your credit cards? Canceled. As of this morning, they're useless. Your phone's been cut from the plan. This is the freedom you wanted, I added, voice dropping into a hiss. Well, congratulations. You're free. That broke her. Her sobs poured through the line, raw and unrestrained. No, no, please, she begged, voice crumbling. I had never heard her sound so unguarded, shattered, but the hollowness inside me left no room for pity. It's already done, I said flatly. Everything you left behind, the clothes, the makeup, the rest of it, it's boxed up on the porch. Pick it up whenever you like. Just make sure I'm not there when you do. Her voice shrank to a whisper. Where am I supposed to go? She whimpered. Daniel, I cut her off before she could finish. Frankly, I don't care, I said, voice colder than winter air. You made your bed, with James. Now lie in it. Then I slammed the phone back into its cradle. My hand trembled. My ears rang with the echo of my pulse. I stood motionless in the kitchen, staring down at the receiver, my breathing uneven. Early sunlight slanted through the window above the sink, catching dust in its rays like ash suspended midair. A new morning. Not a beginning, just the funeral of what once was. I shut my eyes and exhaled, trying to reel in the torrent of thoughts. I'd practiced this moment again and again, rehearsed every line until I could speak it in my sleep. And now that it had played out, all I felt was a void. So this was revenge? Not sweet, just bitter, empty. My hands shook as I dragged out a chair and collapsed into it. The silence inside the house was suffocating. The kids, Emma and Eli, were with my mother for the weekend, far away from the wreckage I had just unleashed. They had no idea their family had splintered overnight. I sat there, surrounded by the hush, letting the weight of it all press down. That call hadn't lasted more than a few minutes, but in that short span, I'd ended a marriage, broken 2 lives, and scattered the remains across a phone line, all while mine lay crumbling beneath me. 200 miles away, in a Columbus hotel room, they were probably still reeling. And here I was, alone, already feeling the wreckage settle around me like dust. This was exactly the conclusion I had anticipated. Still, as I sat in solitude, the rush of adrenaline slowly ebbing away, I was overcome by a deep, echoing emptiness. The anger that had fueled my every step until now was dissipating, making way for grief and an unmistakable sense of finality. I had poured years of love and trust into Lauren, only for her to shatter the very core of what we'd built. The damage was done, and there was no way to reverse it. There was no path leading back to the life we once knew. My name is Daniel Morris. I'm 42 years old and work as a regional sales manager for a building supply distribution company. Until recently, I truly believed I was living the dream, married to the love of my life, father to 2 incredible kids, and settled in a quiet, tidy neighborhood in Brookville, Ohio. On the surface, it all looked perfect. Steady income, a cozy home, happy children, and a marriage I believed in. But now I found myself alone, my heart pounding, my hands unsteady, sitting in the early morning stillness after asking my wife to leave because of her infidelity. It felt unreal, as if I were observing someone else's heartbreak from a distance. I raked my fingers through my hair and inhaled slowly, trying to ground myself. As devastating as this moment was, it hadn't come out of nowhere. It was the culmination of countless small betrayals, each one chipping away at the life we'd shared. I needed to retrace my steps, to recall how the foundation began to crack. So I gathered myself and mentally rewound the story, back to the beginning of the unraveling. Chapter 2. The Illusion Shatters. Just a few short months ago, everything seemed intact. From the outside, we appeared to be a picture-perfect middle-class family. Lauren and I had shared nearly 15 years together. We married right out of college and built our world side by side. Those early days were challenging. Money was tight, and I was just launching my career. Lauren had a short stint working as a bank teller after we got married, but once Emma was born, we agreed she would stay home. She embraced motherhood wholeheartedly, and I was deeply grateful that she was always there for our children. 2 years after Emma's arrival, our son Eli completed our family. The early days were a blur of late nights, baby bottles, and cherished milestones. We weren't rich by any means, but we had what we needed. My career progressed steadily, from a rookie sales rep to a district-level manager. I took pride in being a dependable provider, and Lauren created a warm, welcoming home. My oldest friend, James Carter, had been a constant presence through many of those years, at least in the beginning. We grew up together in Brookville, teammates on the high school football team. He, the charismatic quarterback, I, the reliable wide receiver. We were college roommates, sharing countless adventures and bonding over the chaos of youth. But after we graduated, our paths began to diverge. While I settled into life with Lauren, James drifted, chasing jobs and romantic flings across the country. He had the charm of a wanderer, handsome, quick-witted, effortlessly attractive to women. While I was juggling family life and sales quotas, he was leaping from one city to the next, New York, Los Angeles, pursuing gigs in marketing and sports promotion, never planting roots. He showed up for my wedding, attended a handful of major events, but for the most part, we kept in touch through the occasional text or social media post. Still, I considered him my best friend. Time and distance had not eroded the bond we'd built growing up. I knew he could be self-centered, overly confident, and careless with relationships. But betrayal? That possibility had never once crossed my mind. By last year, life had settled into a rhythm. Emma was 13, navigating 8th grade, while Eli, at 9, was thriving in 4th. With both kids in school most of the day, Lauren began to feel the drag of routine. One evening, I came home to find her seated at the kitchen table, highlighting job listings in the classifieds. "I think I need something just for me," she told me that night, her eyes filled with quiet anticipation. "The kids are older now. I've got time during the day, maybe a part-time job, something that interests me." Her words caught me off guard. For years, Lauren hadn't expressed any desire to rejoin the workforce. But I understood. She had dedicated everything to our children, and now that they were more independent, she longed for something beyond the role of mother and wife. "Of course," I replied, gently squeezing her hand. "If that's what you need, I'm behind you. We'll just need to make sure we can still be there for the kids," I added. "Maybe something during school hours?" She nodded, visibly relieved. "Exactly. I'm not looking to get rich. I just want to use my brain again, contribute something, and not feel like I depend on you for everything." She gave a soft laugh. "And hey, having a little spending money of my own wouldn't be so bad," she said, smiling. I smiled back. "Makes sense. As long as we're still able to have dinner together and show up for the important stuff with the kids, I think it's a great idea." We agreed to find the right balance. Not long after, Lauren landed a position. Word had gotten out, most likely through James, that Carter Ford, the car dealership his father owned, was on the lookout for a part-time receptionist. It felt like a perfect fit. The hours were limited to weekday mornings. The dealership was just a short 15-minute drive, and James's father, Richard Carter, had been a family friend for as long as we could remember. After the interview, Lauren came home practically glowing. She said Richard had all but handed her the job right then and there. She was beaming with a kind of nervous energy, excited but a little on edge too. "It's mostly answering phones and setting up service appointments," she explained. "But hey, it's a start." I told her it sounded like a solid match, and I truly believed it. The idea of her working with the Carters gave me peace of mind. They were a well-known and respected family in our area. Richard wasn't just a savvy businessman. He owned the largest car dealership in the county and had a reputation for generously supporting local charities and events. If Lauren was going to get back into working life, I was relieved it would be somewhere we knew and trusted, among people we'd known for years. That spring, she began her new schedule at Carter Ford. She worked weekdays from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., occasionally covering a Saturday. We had to rearrange a few routines to accommodate it, but we adjusted quickly. I'd handle the morning school drop-off on my way to the office, and Lauren would leave soon after for her shift at the dealership. She usually arrived home before Eli got back from school, and Emma was old enough to take the bus and let herself in when needed. It was a little strange at first, hearing Lauren talk about her workday. Amusing calls from customers, the latest dealership gossip, updates on sales, rather than the usual topics of PTA meetings and block parties. But I welcomed the shift. There was something new in her, an energy, a sense of pride from having a space of her own outside of being a mom and wife, and I was genuinely proud of her for it. I truly thought the job had been good for her. She seemed more alive, more confident. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder if I missed subtle clues, signs I didn't yet know how to interpret. But at the time, everything felt normal. That is, until one evening in October, about 6 months ago. That evening, I stepped into the house and was immediately struck by the inviting aroma of lasagna baking in the oven. The dining table was neatly arranged, complete with wine glasses and folded napkins. It wasn't unprecedented, but it definitely felt more elaborate than usual. In the kitchen, Lauren was humming softly, wearing a touch of makeup and a powder blue blouse instead of her typical loungewear. "Well, someone's in a great mood," I said, taking off my coat. "What happened?" Did Eli finally clean his room? I joked. She gave me a bright smile that didn't quite hide her nerves. No special reason. I just thought I'd make dinner a little nicer tonight. It'll be ready in about 10 minutes. Go relax, maybe freshen up. She handed me a glass of red wine, a 2012 Napa Valley Cabernet, my favorite. Her unusually cheerful tone caught my attention. Lauren was always warm, but this felt dialed up somehow. Still, I brushed it off as just a good day. After I'd changed, we sat down for dinner, just the two of us. The kids were spending the evening with my mother, who liked having them over on Wednesdays for some solo grandma time. As the meal went on, it became obvious Lauren had something planned. She lifted her wine glass and took a breath. "There's something I want to talk to you about," she said, trying to sound offhand, but her tone gave away the tension beneath it. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation and unease. "Okay," I said slowly, setting my fork down. "What's up?" She took a small sip before speaking. "You remember how James's dad has mostly stepped back from the business, right? Well, James has taken over now. He's running the whole place." I nodded. James had emailed a while back to say he was moving back to Brookville and stepping up at the dealership. We'd grabbed a drink since then, and he'd mentioned how hectic things were. I hadn't thought much more about it. "Well," Lauren continued, "he's building out the administrative and marketing departments, and he offered me a full-time role. He wants me to be his executive assistant." The way I lowered my wine glass sent a small splash onto the table. "Executive assistant? To James?" I echoed. She nodded. Her eyes lit up. "He said I've been doing really well at the front desk, and that I understand the way the place runs. He's got so much on his plate right now, and he says he needs someone he can rely on. It comes with a full salary, benefits, the works." I forced a smile, but my thoughts were suddenly racing. That was a big leap. Executive assistant to the general manager wasn't just a title change. I bit the inside of my cheek and tried to keep my voice steady. From answering phones to becoming James's right hand, that's a major step. If she picked up on the doubt in my voice, she didn't acknowledge it. "I know," she said, her voice breathless with disbelief. "I didn't expect it either. But James says I already know the team and the systems. He told me I've got more potential than I realize." Unfulfilled promise. The words echoed faintly, refusing to fade. Something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. James had only returned to town 6 months ago, and already he'd promoted Lauren from her front desk role to serve as his personal assistant. She sat across from me now, watching my reaction, her teeth lightly worrying her bottom lip. I became aware of the silence stretching too long. "You told him yes?" I asked, keeping my voice measured. "I said I'd discuss it with you first," she replied. "The schedule's more demanding, basically full-time, but the salary, Daniel, it's almost double what I make now." She hesitated, watching my face. "We could save more for the kids' college. Or maybe finally tackle that master bathroom renovation we keep pushing aside." Her voice faded a bit as I honed in on one name, James. I knew him too well. James was charming, impulsive, and rarely respected boundaries. I didn't want to assume he'd behave inappropriately with Lauren, but ignoring his history wasn't an option either. He'd once gotten involved with a secretary back in California. It had ended messily. Red flags flashed in my mind like warning lights. My old best friend, now working side by side with my wife every day, that thought unsettled me deeply. "That's a pretty big change," I finally said, keeping my tone even. "A full-time shift would definitely affect our daily routine." "What about the kids? Drop-offs, pickups?" "I've worked it out," she answered quickly. "Emma can ride with the neighbors in the mornings. And maybe your mom could help with Eli a couple afternoons a week. My hours would probably be 8 to 4:30, maybe 5, she added. "James is open to flexibility. He said we can adjust things for family when needed." I nodded slowly. "You're seriously considering this?" "I am," she said, reaching across the table to place her hand over mine. "I know it means I won't be around the house as much. And I know you've always liked having me close, but this feels like something real, like a chance to grow. I'm genuinely excited, Daniel." I gently squeezed her hand, even as a tightness twisted in my chest. This clearly mattered to her, and I didn't want to be the kind of husband who clipped his wife's wings out of jealousy. But was that really what this was? James had always had a flirtatious streak, true, but Lauren wasn't naive. She was strong, capable, and deeply committed to her family. Still, something about the situation felt fragile. I forced a smile. "If it means that much to you, I'm with you. Executive assistant to the GM is a big leap." Relief lit up her face. "You mean it?" she asked. "We'll sort out the rest. Emma can pitch in, and your mom loves spending time with the kids. If you're okay with it, I'd really like to try." "Of course," I said softly. She stood up, came around to my side of the table, and wrapped her arms around me, resting her cheek against mine. "I'm so lucky to have you," she whispered. I held her close, my arms tightening instinctively, but as I returned her embrace, my gaze drifted to a blank spot on the wall. My thoughts churned. I wanted to be her supporter, but I also wanted to protect what we'd built. Something about all of this, the timing, the sudden advancement, James's involvement, felt unstable, like we were stepping onto thin ice. That night, Lauren slept peacefully beside me while I lay awake staring at the ceiling, her even breaths the only sound in the room. I kept replaying our conversation over and over. I knew James too well. I'd seen how easily he won people over. His charm was effortless. And now Lauren, kind, radiant, trusting, would be spending hours in close quarters with him, maybe traveling, late evenings, just the two of them. "Cut it out," I muttered in the darkness. Was I being paranoid? Did I really believe James would cross a line, or that Lauren would let him? The thought filled me with guilt. Lauren had never given me a reason to doubt her. And James, for all his boundary-pushing ways, had never, as far as I knew, gotten involved with a friend's partner. Eventually, sleep came, but it was light and restless. In the weeks that followed, we adapted. Lauren transitioned to her new schedule, and we rearranged things at home to keep everything running. Emma, now 13, stepped up in a big way, helping with chores, looking after Eli after school. My mother gladly stepped in when needed. Lauren thrived in her new role. She came home buzzing with energy, sharing stories about organizing James's meetings or streamlining the office systems. I smiled, told her how proud I was, and I meant it, outwardly. But inside, that quiet tension remained. I started picking up on subtle changes. Lauren's wardrobe shifted. Gone were the dealership polos. She now wore fitted skirts, crisp blouses, a touch of makeup. Tasteful, nothing over the line, but different. Intentional. She talked about wanting to refine her appearance, so she changed up her hair. During the weekdays, there was now a faint hint of fragrance that lingered in her wake. None of these things were unusual by themselves. They were the kinds of subtle updates you might expect from someone stepping into a role with more public exposure. Still, I couldn't help but keep track, each shift stacking onto the last, creating a quiet pattern I hadn't yet figured out. And then, James began turning up more often. He started dropping in for dinner now and then, always lively, full of charm, captivating the kids with animated stories about their dad's wilder younger days. Under different circumstances, his visits might have felt like a pleasant throwback. But I was already uneasy, and there was an undercurrent I couldn't ignore, a particular dynamic between him and Lauren, a look that lingered too long. A joke that clearly excluded everyone else. When he was distracted, I'd sometimes catch her watching him, eyes lit with something that looked like admiration, and maybe something more. Maybe I was overthinking. Or maybe I was just trying to avoid the possibility that I wasn't imagining things. After all, he was her supervisor now, and of course, she'd want to stay in his good graces. It made sense for her to be enthusiastic, to go the extra mile. I kept telling myself not to make more of it than it was. There was nothing concrete, only a nagging sense that something between them had changed, and I didn't like it. The moment everything tilted came on a Friday night. I got home a bit earlier than usual and found Emma hunched over her schoolwork at the table while Eli was glued to the TV. I loosened my tie and asked, "Where's Mom?" Without glancing up, Emma replied, "She had to stay late. She texted and said James needed her to finish some end-of-quarter stuff. She told us not to wait up." A knot of irritation tightened in my chest. That made it the third time this week Lauren had been out late on account of something James supposedly needed. Even the kids were starting to notice. Emma tried to play it cool, but the disappointment on her face was clear. I reached out and gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "All right," I said. "How about we order pizza? She can have some when she gets back." She nodded, but just as I turned to grab my phone, she said quietly, "Dad, is Mom okay?" I stopped in my tracks. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, twirling the end of her pencil. "I don't know," she murmured. "She's just different. Always busy. She looks tired, and when I talk to her, it's like she's not really there, not like she used to be." I forced a smile for her sake. "She's just adjusting to a big new role, that's all. But she loves you and your brother more than anything. Things will settle down soon." Emma gave a small shrug and went back to her homework, but her words stayed with me, sharp and persistent. Later that night, after the kids had gone to bed and Lauren finally walked through the door, I knew I couldn't keep pretending nothing was wrong. It was just past 9. She looked drained and was carrying a takeout bag. "Sorry," she said as soon as she saw me. "James and I had to wrap up some budget stuff for Richard. It ran longer than we thought. Are the kids asleep?" "They've eaten. They're in bed," I replied, keeping my tone level, though I was holding more in than I let show. She sighed and set down her purse and the bag. "Thanks. I know this week's been a mess." She moved into the kitchen and began unpacking dinner. I followed her. "Lauren," I said, more firmly now, "we need to talk." She paused and looked at me warily, sensing the change in my voice. "About what?" I crossed my arms and leaned against the counter, trying to gather my thoughts. Now that I had her attention, I struggled to find the right words. I didn't want to sound accusatory or paranoid, but I couldn't ignore what I'd been feeling, or Emma's worried question. "It's about work. About you and James." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Me and James? What about us?" I took a slow breath. "I'll be direct. It feels like you're spending an unusual amount of time with him. The late nights, the private lunches, the endless meetings. I get that he's your boss, but he's also been my closest friend for years. And I know what he's like." She looked startled, and for a moment something flickered across her face, guilt or maybe fear, before she composed herself. "You're suspicious?" "I'm concerned," I said. "Concerned that maybe he's overstepping. You know his reputation. I just want to make sure things stay professional. That he's not taking advantage of your trust, or mine." "You think James is hitting on me?" she asked, her voice sharp with disbelief, though her face had gone a shade paler. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe not. But something doesn't feel right, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't noticing." "You've been getting home later than usual," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "At work, it's like you and James are joined at the hip." "That's work, Daniel," she shot back, stepping closer, her eyes blazing. "James is my boss. I'm his assistant. That's the dynamic. So yes, we talk a lot. Yes, we have lunch together. That's part of my job." "I understand that," I said, tension tightening my jaw. "But you can't blame me for being uneasy." "I've known James longer than you think," I added. "He's charming, sure, but he doesn't always respect boundaries." I chose each word with care, hoping she'd hear the warning beneath the surface. Her face grew stormy. "Excuse me?" she hissed. "Are you accusing me? Or him of something? I lifted my hands, palms open. I'm not making accusations. I'm trying to explain why I'm worried. You're beautiful, Lauren. And James, well, he tends to blur the lines. I just want you to stay cautious. She let the fork she was holding fall onto the table with a sharp clang. Are you actually serious right now? She asked, voice shaking with fury. I've been bending over backwards to help support us, and now you're suggesting what? That I'm sleeping my way up the ladder? Or that I'm too blind to notice if he made a move? That's not what I'm saying, I growled, frustration boiling up. I trust you. I just don't trust him. Her cheeks flushed crimson. James has been your best friend for years, she snapped. You've never had an issue with him. He's encouraged me every step of the way. And suddenly now he's a predator? My teeth clenched. People can wear friendly masks and still have ulterior motives, Lauren. Don't act like that's unheard of. She drew in a sharp breath, as if I'd physically struck her. So now I'm some gullible fool? She asked, her voice cracking under the weight of hurt and fury. Just a clueless wife who can't see she's being manipulated? The moment the words left my mouth, I wished I could take them back. That's not what I meant. But it's what you implied. She folded her arms, blinking rapidly, as if fighting tears. You know what I think, Daniel. I think this isn't about James at all. I think you're jealous. Her words hit hard, knocking the wind out of me. You can't stand that I'm not just cooking dinner and running errands anymore. You hate that I have something of my own. So instead, you're turning James into some kind of threat to make yourself feel better. My throat tightened, and though I tried to keep calm, my voice came out sharp. That's total bullshit. I've been on your side from day one. I only brought this up because something feels off. I didn't want it to spiral into something worse. Well, congratulations, she said coldly. Talking about it was the mistake. Clearly, I muttered, bitterness rising like bile. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Lauren wiped at her eyes, breathing unevenly. I'm going to bed, she said flatly. There's leftover pizza in the fridge if you're hungry. Without another word, she brushed past me and walked out of the kitchen. I stood there, unmoving, listening to her footsteps pounding up the stairs, each step louder than the last. Then came the sound of our bedroom door slamming shut. I remained frozen, staring blankly at the far wall, the fight replaying in my mind like a loop I couldn't escape. My stomach twisted. Lauren and I weren't the type to fight, not like this. Sure, we had our moments, the occasional snippy comment after a long day, but this was a full-blown eruption, and I hated it. Maybe she had a point. Maybe jealousy was clouding my judgment. The last thing I ever intended was to undermine her accomplishments or make her feel untrusted. But God, what kind of husband hints that his wife might be cheating without a shred of proof? Then again, what if it wasn't just paranoia? What if my instincts were picking up on something real? Eventually, I trudged upstairs and settled into the guest room, hoping that space might help diffuse the tension. The next morning, we acted out our roles like badly cast actors. We smiled for the kids, pretended everything was fine, but the tension lingered like smoke after a fire. Emma and Eli weren't fooled. Kids never are. Lauren left early, barely saying goodbye, her tone clipped and cold. I headed to work with a knot in my stomach. Concentration was impossible. By lunch, I found myself staring blankly at a sales report, unable to process a single number. My mind was stuck on the night before. Had I crossed a line? If James was truly innocent, then I'd insulted not only Lauren's loyalty but also his character. But if my instincts weren't wrong, if there was something going on, then confronting her may have only taught them to hide it better. And honestly, I couldn't decide which possibility scared me more. Later that day, I considered calling Lauren to admit how badly I'd handled things. But before I could even open my phone, a message lit up the screen from James. James, hey man, been a while. Want to grab a drink tonight? The timing was almost eerie, just a day after the argument with Lauren, about him no less. It had been ages since James and I hung out one-on-one. These days, I only saw him in passing at group events. Whether it was pure coincidence or somehow tied to the fallout with Lauren, I couldn't tell. Maybe he picked up on the tension. Maybe she let something slip at the office. Whatever the case, something about it felt off. Or maybe I was starting to view everything involving James through a lens of suspicion. Still, it seemed like an opportunity. A chance to see him up close, read between the lines. Me. Yeah, O'Leary's at 6? James. Perfect. First round's on me. I clocked out early and headed for O'Leary's, our usual haunt back in the day. I arrived before him, slipped into a booth, and started spinning a coaster absent-mindedly while waiting. Before long, James strolled in, carrying himself with that effortless swagger and the familiar grin already plastered on his face. Daniel boy, he greeted me with that smooth, familiar warmth, sliding into the seat across the table. Been too long. He was polished, as always. Tailored shirt, subtle accessories, not a hair out of place. Even at 43, he could easily pass for someone 10 years younger, and he wore that fact like a well-fitted jacket. His presence filled the space, charisma practically radiating from him. "Hey, James," I replied, doing my best to smile. We shook hands across the table, and some of the old rhythm between us came back. For a second, I felt a pang of guilt for doubting him. This was someone who'd had my back since we were teens. We ordered drinks and eased into small talk, sports updates, his take on being back in a slower town, the latest antics from my kids. It was all casual, light. But midway through our second round, the conversation began to shift into more delicate territory. "So," he said with a grin, taking a sip, "how's it going being Mr. Mom in the evenings? I know Lauren's been caught up helping me juggle things." Even though his voice was relaxed, the comment struck a nerve. I kept my tone neutral. "It's been an adjustment," I said evenly, "but we're figuring it out. She really seems to be enjoying the new gig." James nodded, still smiling. "She's been incredible. Honestly, I'd be buried under a pile of meetings and missed calls without her. She's a lifesaver. Richard even joked he's finally not scared of my calendar anymore." He laughed. I joined in, but mine was faint, mechanical. "Yeah," I said. "She's definitely used to managing chaos, especially with me and the kids." He chuckled and arched a brow, amused. "You're lucky," he said. "She's smart, crazy organized, really top tier. Honestly, we should have brought her into this role a long time ago." I watched his face carefully. He looked sincere, and yet something inside me stayed wary. "I won't lie, the promotion caught me off guard," I said, trying to sound casual. "Felt kind of sudden." He shrugged. "Fair enough. It was unconventional, but I saw her potential. Front desk was a waste of her abilities. We needed someone reliable, and she's practically family." The word family hit something raw, but I didn't react. "Right," I said. "Someone you can count on." "Exactly," he agreed. "And I really appreciate you being chill about it. I know it's meant some late nights for her. Last thing I want is to cause tension between you two." His expression showed what could have been genuine concern or just a polished performance. He seemed to sense something was up. Or maybe he already knew. I debated how to respond. Maybe if I put the truth out there, I'd see what surfaced. "We actually argued about it," I admitted, staring into my glass. "Guess I've been a little tense." His brows lifted. "Tense? What about?" I looked him in the eye. "About how much time you two are spending together. I trust Lauren. I do. But I also know you, Jace. You've always had a certain pull with women." I said it with a hint of humor, trying to soften the words with a smile. He raised his hands in mock surrender. Whoa. You think... What? That I'm trying to make a move on Lauren?" He laughed, but something in it rang hollow. Or maybe I was just too tuned into everything. She's beautiful, James, I said simply. And you're charming, unattached. I wouldn't fault any husband for getting uneasy if his wife worked closely with a guy like you. His expression tightened, pain written clearly across his face. You really think that? Lauren's like family to me, like a sister. I'd never go there, not with her, not with any of you. I stared at him, searching his face for any flicker of dishonesty. Not once? Not ever, he said without hesitation, giving his head a small shake. You're way off here, Morris. Yeah, I mess around. I like to joke, maybe flirt a little, I won't lie. But Lauren, no. I wouldn't disrespect you or her like that. I drew in a long breath, forcing a nod. Okay. I get it. I really do. I overreacted. Sorry. It's just, I haven't seen her much lately. And when I do, it's always James this or James that. It got under my skin. James placed a hand on my shoulder with a reassuring squeeze. No harm done. Honestly, I'm glad you said something. The last thing I want is to get between you and Lauren, or ruin what you and I have. I'll ease off. Cut back on the late nights. Share more of the load with the team. I mean that. He sounded like he meant it, and I wanted to believe him, badly. Maybe I'd let my paranoia spiral. Maybe I was the one making something out of nothing. Maybe Lauren's frustration had more to do with me than him. After that, the tension loosened. We drifted into old stories and shared laughs, just like old times. An hour slipped past before we finally called it a night. He pulled me in for a quick, familiar hug. Say hi to Lauren for me. Tell her to stop letting work stress her out so much. Will do. I'll see you at the picnic tomorrow. Yeah? Yeah. The annual Carter Ford family picnic was set for Saturday afternoon. It would be the first time I saw Lauren in her new element, surrounded by her co-workers, including James. See you then, I said, trying to sound relaxed. As I walked to my car, a flicker of calm came over me. Maybe the picnic would put all this to rest. Quiet the doubts that kept nagging at me. If only I'd known what was coming. If I'd had even a hint of the weekend ahead, maybe I'd have made different choices. But I didn't. I was still blind to the storm gathering around me, already caught in its pull without realizing it. Chapter 4. The Ugly Truth. Saturday arrived warm and bright, the riverbank buzzing with the annual Carter Ford picnic. In any other context, it might have felt idyllic, laid back, full of family energy. Colleagues and their spouses wandered through the park. The covered pavilion echoed with friendly chatter and bursts of laughter. Kids darted around the grass, tossing frisbees, while the scent of grilled burgers floated in the air. I showed up with Emma and Eli, doing my best to play the part, the relaxed dad, the devoted husband. On the outside, we looked like any other smiling family out for a carefree Saturday. Inside, I was a wreck. Recent days had taught me a hard truth. Accusations get you nowhere. You learn to observe instead. To keep your suspicions under wraps and watch the pieces move. Lauren had gotten there earlier, said she was helping with setup. I spotted her across the field, assisting one of the older accounting ladies trying to balance a paper plate piled high. Lauren wore her best work face, polished, friendly, all smiles, the picture of charm. Her eyes met mine. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face before she offered a small, cautious smile. I raised a hand in greeting and steered the kids toward the buffet line. It was the first real moment I'd seen her since our argument, apart from a tense exchange that morning. Friday night, I'd swallowed my pride and told her I was wrong. Said I was sorry. I needed her to think I was moving on, at least for now. If forgiveness was a performance, I had to sell it. Lauren stepped away from her conversation and joined us. Hey, she said quietly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. There was hesitation in her voice. She wasn't sure where we stood. Hey, I replied, keeping my tone steady. This wasn't the time or place for conflict. Not here. Not in front of the kids. Everything looks great, I added. You guys did a good job. Relief flickered in her expression. Thanks. I'm glad you came. She rested her hand gently on Emma's shoulder and gave Eli a quick, playful squeeze. There's a sack race starting over there, she said, motioning toward a group of wives arranging burlap sacks on the grass. Why don't you two go join in? The kids took off, oblivious to the undercurrent between us. We'd kept them shielded from our troubles, careful not to let it spill over. Lauren and I stood together in silence until she finally spoke again. I was thinking, maybe tomorrow we could take the kids to the lake, just us. It might be good. A way to reconnect. Her eyes met mine, quietly searching for hope. For an answer. It felt like a peace offering. Sounds fun, I replied, hiding the lie behind a practiced smile. I had no plans of showing up at the lake tomorrow, but that wasn't something she needed to know. She responded with a hopeful beam, and for just a second, a pang of guilt tightened in my chest. If I hadn't uncovered the truth the previous night, I might have appreciated her attempt to reconnect. Some small part of me still clung to the idea, but that part was eroding quickly. I'm going to check on the food, Lauren said, gesturing toward the grill where one of the service leads was flamboyantly setting burgers aflame like he was auditioning for a cooking show. We'll talk in a bit? Sure, I answered with a nod. She gave my arm a light squeeze, warm enough to look genuine to anyone watching, then drifted off, embodying the flawless assistant and charming hostess. I spent the next hour moving from one small group to the next, slipping into the role of cheerful husband as easily as putting on a jacket. I complimented the lead salesperson on his stellar quarterly numbers, told the new front desk girl her little boy was cute as a button, and tossed beanbags alongside a few of the other dads. To any casual observer, I was just another guy enjoying a company picnic on a sunny Saturday afternoon. But inwardly, I was alert, scanning, assessing. Lauren never left my awareness, neither did James. James was omnipresent, patting backs, exchanging handshakes, joking with ease, flashing that polished smile like he was born in front of a camera. He played the charming prince to perfection, as always. From the outside, he seemed completely composed around Lauren. I caught them in a few group chats, but there was minimal interaction. Just nods, the occasional neutral smile. Had I not learned what I had, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But I had, and I didn't trust what I was seeing. The real break came when I strolled behind the pavilion to grab a soda. I passed close to a pair of junior sales guys deep in conversation, oblivious to my presence. Bro, did you hear about Carter and Lauren dipping out again yesterday? One of them whispered with a snicker. I froze behind a tree, my hand just inches from the cooler lid. No kidding, the other replied, chuckling. Those two are something else. Ducked out and left us to deal with customers. Right? I had to hold down the floor myself. They were gone for like 2 hours. Doubt they were talking inventory, the first one said, making exaggerated air quotes. They both laughed under their breath. My chest constricted. There was only one Carter at the dealership, and only one Lauren. They were talking about my wife and James. Careful, dude, the second warned, voice dropping. That's the boss's kid and his favorite co-worker. Better not go spreading it around. Yeah, the first muttered. Still, it's not exactly a secret. They're not even trying to hide it. I forced myself to move again, nonchalantly grabbing a can from the cooler while my fingers trembled from a surge of rage and dread. I wanted to confront them right there, demand answers everyone else apparently already had. Where were they going? What were they really doing during those vanishing acts? But I couldn't afford to let on that I knew. That overheard exchange was all I needed to validate what I feared most. Lauren and James weren't just being careless. They were blatantly visible, bold enough that even junior employees were whispering about it. Disappearing during business hours, for reasons that clearly had nothing to do with work. The implications were glaring. I melted back into the crowd, barely sipping my drink, the taste sour against the bitterness climbing in my throat. I watched the two salesmen part ways quickly as James strolled by, giving one a friendly slap on the back like nothing was amiss. They tried to play it cool, but I saw the flicker of unease in their faces. James had no clue that I'd just overheard damning confirmation of his betrayal with my wife. My wife. Just thinking the words made me feel like I was being gutted from the inside. Still, gossip and scraps of overheard conversation wouldn't be enough, not if I wanted to confront them in a way that actually mattered. I needed something concrete, tangible proof. But now I had a starting point, a pattern. They weren't cautious. They slipped away together for long stretches. There had to be a usual place, a familiar routine. The rest of the picnic blurred past me in a haze. I kept smiling, chatting, keeping up the performance. When things started wrapping up later in the afternoon, I helped fold chairs into the car, buckled the kids into their seats, and caught sight of Lauren saying her goodbyes to two of the older accountants. She blew a kiss in our direction and mouthed, "See you at home." As we drove home, Emma chatted nonstop about her second-place finish in the sack race, holding up her little ribbon like it was a gold medal. Next to her, Eli was nearly asleep, exhausted from a long day in the sun. I nodded along, tossing out a few, "That's awesome," and "Great job," here and there. But my mind was somewhere else entirely. I'd come to terms with something I'd been resisting for too long. Lauren and James had crossed a line. Any lingering doubt I'd been clinging to had disappeared completely. Oddly, I wasn't devastated. At least, not yet. What settled in instead was a cold, steely determination. I knew the emotional blow would come eventually, but for now, my hands just clenched tighter around the steering wheel. They thought they were clever. That they were getting away with something. But they were wrong. I wasn't in the dark anymore, and it was only a matter of time before things flipped. Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, I made a call. It was to someone I trusted. Jim Hunter, one of the mechanics from the dealership. We used to play on the same rec league softball team during the summers. He always came across as straightforward and trustworthy. More importantly, he wasn't one of James's people. Jim agreed to meet me early Sunday morning at a downtown coffee shop before his kids' soccer match. I kept the reason vague, told him it was something work-related involving Carter Ford. I didn't explain much, but he must have picked up enough from my tone. Sunday arrived with warm, clear skies, completely at odds with the storm brewing in my chest. I told Lauren I was heading out to run some errands. She barely looked up, busy assembling a picnic spread for the lake outing she thought we were still going on. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jim was already waiting in a corner booth, hands wrapped around a tall mug of black coffee. He rose as I approached, concern etched across his features. "Hey, Daniel," he greeted me. "You all right? You sounded off yesterday." I didn't bother with pleasantries. "Jim," I said quietly, firmly, "I need you to level with me about Lauren and James. Specifically at work, and not the sugar-coated version." Jim's expression shifted. He stared into his cup, slowly rotating it in his hands. "I figured this might be about them," he murmured. So he knew. That confirmation hit like a gut punch, and a twisted kind of relief. "Tell me everything," I said. He exhaled deeply. Since Sylvia had her own card on the account, the purchases were likely hers. If connected to an affair, they could constitute marital asset misuse, evidence that would be invaluable in court when asserting dissipation. "So it's real?" I asked, barely audible. "They're involved?" He gave a slow, heavy nod. "I've never seen them, caught in the act. But yeah, everyone at work's been talking. It's not much of a secret anymore." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "How long has it been going on?" Jim looked uneasy. "It's tough to pin down. James started as general manager in May, right? By midsummer, stuff was already off, She was in his office all the time. Door closed. They'd leave for lunch together, not at the diner or anywhere public, off-site. 2, sometimes 3 times a week. They'd disappear for hours. At first it was just rumors, but then one of the sales guys decided to check. He followed them, wanted to see if all the talk was legit. They went to the River Park Inn. He didn't look at me as he said it. The River Park Inn. Cheap, discreet, notorious for this kind of thing. Just hearing the name turned my stomach. The image of Lauren walking into one of those rooms in the middle of the day with James made my blood boil. Jim continued. They usually go to the same room, 214, I think. Old move. But I guess doing it during work hours makes them feel less likely to get caught. No one's really watching then. Mr. Carter's never around midday, so they probably figure there's no risk. Jim rubbed his face, visibly worn. I'm sorry, Daniel. I should have told you sooner. I wanted to. I really did. But Lauren's my friend too. I kept hoping it was just something dumb that would flame out. I didn't want to blow up your life if it might die quietly on its own. I could see the guilt written all over him. And despite the anger burning through me, I got it. It's okay, I said, my voice taut with emotion. I don't hold it against you. They were to blame, not you. Jim looked visibly relieved I wasn't about to slug him. For what it's worth, he said, a bunch of folks at work feel bad for you. Then came the qualifier. But you know how it goes. No one wants to put themselves on the line. Technically speaking, James is still in charge. And your wife? She's well-liked. People gravitate to her. No one really knew how to respond to the whole thing. I swallowed down the bitterness clawing up my throat. Her charm had successfully masked the betrayal beneath. Did anyone ever actually catch them? I asked. Like Mr. Carter, or someone who could have intervened? Jim hesitated, unsure. Not exactly. But rumor is, Richard, the owner, almost walked in on them about a month ago. One afternoon, around lunchtime, Richard came looking for James. When he asked where he was, someone, without thinking, said he was grabbing lunch at the River Park Inn. They didn't realize what that revealed. Shortly after, Lauren came back to her desk looking flustered, cheeks flushed. James, on the other hand, was cool and collected, claimed he'd been out test driving a car. Richard Carter isn't stupid. I'm fairly certain he had a word with James afterward. Lauren left early that day, visibly shaken, but nothing really changed. James, Jam, I should say, kept doing whatever he wanted. Old habit. He went by Jam back when we were in school. Slipped my mind. I sat there for a beat, absorbing it. So Richard Carter might have suspected something wasn't right. Maybe he didn't realize who James was seeing, or maybe he just couldn't fathom his own son being that reckless. But if I could gather solid, irrefutable proof and put it in front of Richard, it might be a serious game changer. The Carters guard their public image like it's sacred. Suddenly I remembered, there was a moral conduct clause in the employee contracts. Richard used to brag about it, how it helped protect the dealership's pristine reputation. My thoughts kicked into overdrive. Evidence, documentation, tangible repercussions. Jim, I said carefully, I need a big favor, and I need your complete discretion. He met my eyes, steady. What do you need? I leaned forward. I'm pursuing legal action, I told him. But to make it count, I need rock-solid evidence, pictures, dates, details, and I need anything you know about company policies they might have violated. There's got to be something in the handbook about this kind of behavior. He nodded, slow and thoughtful. Yeah, there's a clause about employee conduct, unbecoming behavior, and stuff like that. If someone forced the issue, they could both lose their jobs. Richard's old school about that kind of thing, at least on the surface. Exactly. I lowered my voice further. Tomorrow I'm contacting a lawyer, and probably hiring a private investigator too. If we can catch them red-handed, that's the best possible outcome. Any idea when they usually sneak away? He furrowed his brow. Tuesdays and Thursdays seem to be the pattern. That's what I've noticed. Also, this might matter. Lauren told someone in accounting that she and James might be taking a work trip. Overnight. Something for regional management, supposedly. That caught my attention. A business trip? I repeated. That might be the perfect setup to catch them, legally and literally. Did she say when? 3 weeks from now, I think. Cleveland. 2 nights, if I remember right. I locked that detail into place. Thanks, Jim. Honestly, you've helped more than you know. He looked at me with quiet concern. What are you going to do, Daniel? My grip tightened around the coffee cup. I'm going to make sure neither of them comes out of this clean, I said, every word slow and deliberate. They lied to me, they humiliated me, and they're screwing up my kids' lives. I'm going to take Jam Carter and Lauren Morris down, legally, thoroughly, and without mercy. Jim reached across the table and put a hand on my shoulder. If you need me to verify anything, I'm in, he said. I'll deny it if anyone at work asks, but if your lawyer wants an off-the-record statement, I'll tell what I know. I nodded. Thanks. That means more than I can say. I won't forget it. We left the cafe not long after, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like someone had handed me a compass, a way through the storm I'd been lost in. It wasn't easy to hear, but at least now I had some clarity. And more importantly, I had a plan. As I drove home, the steps began forming clearly in my mind. Attorney, PI, hard evidence, divorce proceedings, maybe even a civil case against James for alienation of affection, if the state allowed for it. And possibly legal action against the company too, if I could tie it to that morality clause. I'd let the lawyer decide what was viable. The idea of a massive lawsuit, a potentially 7-figure one, started taking shape at the edge of my thoughts. James, and everyone who helped cover this up, would pay, one way or another. I pulled into the driveway just before noon. Lauren stepped out of the house, picnic basket in hand. She was dressed in a sleeveless blouse and cropped pants, the perfect image of a cheerful, wholesome suburban mom heading off for a lakeside afternoon with her loving family. A hint of a smirk played on her lips. Back so soon? I was starting to think the hardware store adopted you, she teased, her voice light, threaded with warmth. Yeah, sorry. Long lines, I replied, keeping my tone even as I lifted a plastic bag filled with odds and ends I barely looked at before buying. It helped keep the lie alive. I grabbed the sprinkler head and a couple of other things we needed. That's great, she said, clearly pleased. She looked genuinely happy to see me, as if everything was normal, as if she hadn't been deceiving me for months. The kids are already in their suits. They're bouncing off the walls. I packed lunch too. I matched her smile and stepped closer, placing a kiss on her cheek. That tiny gesture nearly shattered me. Pretending to love her in that moment felt like walking across broken glass, but I pulled it off. Always on top of things, I murmured. Her eyes sparkled, full of something that looked dangerously like gratitude, or maybe hope. She probably believed this meant I was softening, that my efforts were a sign of forgiveness, that maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. And some part of me hated how I almost felt sorry for her. But I couldn't lose sight of the truth. The people who betrayed me had forfeited any right to compassion. Less than an hour later, we were crammed into the minivan, driving toward Lake Winston. Lauren and the kids sang loudly to peppy radio songs. I even hummed along now and then, keeping up the illusion, playing the part of the loving husband, the cheerful dad. One final performance. But inside I was counting down the minutes, watching the clock devour every second until Monday. Because once the law office opened its doors, the real business would begin. My marriage? That was already gone. Lauren just hadn't figured it out yet. And James? He had no idea what kind of reckoning was heading his way. I turned to the window, watching the trees blur past, my kids' laughter floating behind me. From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect family. But appearances lie. All I had to do was keep pretending for one more day. After that, the masks would come off, and the battle for my future would begin. Chapter 5. The Setup for Payback. By Monday morning, I was seated in an office downtown, facing Linda Cole, a veteran divorce attorney with a reputation for cutting through nonsense and getting results. She'd cleared time in her schedule to meet with me. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, and clearly not one to waste a minute. We barely finished introductions before she got straight to business. "So, Daniel, you said this concerns potential infidelity?" "Yes," I said, my jaw tight though I kept my voice level. "My wife is having an affair. I have evidence. I want to move forward with a divorce immediately. And I'd like to know if there's any legal action we can take against the man she's been seeing." Linda folded her hands on the desk and gave a steady nod. "Got it. I'm sorry you're going through this. Let's start from the beginning. Tell me everything, how you found out, what proof you have or hope to get, and what outcome you're aiming for." I took a breath to steady myself and began recounting everything. The changes in Lauren's behavior that started months ago, the whispers from colleagues who had seen her and James sneaking off to a nearby motel during work hours, their upcoming business trip, the next chance they'd have to be alone, and the dynamics at Carter Ford. James Carter was both her boss and the son of the company's owner. Also, he used to be my friend. "I haven't confronted either of them yet," I said finally. "I want to be strategic. I'm going to file on grounds of adultery, and I want every possible advantage when it comes to custody and protecting my assets." Linda jotted notes quickly, nodding as I spoke. "You did well not to tip your hand while collecting intel. In this state, adultery qualifies for a fault-based divorce. That can significantly affect things like spousal support and child custody, especially if the affair is seen as destabilizing for the kids. It's helpful that she doesn't suspect anything. We'll make sure she's served with no warning. I want it fast, clean. No room for negotiation," I said, doing my best to keep the fury in check. She broke her vows, and James, he knew what he was doing. He stabbed me in the back. They haven't even tried to hide it. I want to use everything the law gives me. A faint smile touched Linda's lips. "Understood. We'll move on two fronts, one for the divorce and one exploring possible civil action against Mr. Carter." She flipped her legal pad to a fresh page. "First, we'll draft a complaint that cites adultery. We'll request you receive primary custody, arguing that her choices reflect poor judgment and emotional instability. We'll also aim for a larger share of the marital assets in your favor, citing her misconduct. Depending on the judge, we might not get everything, but it's a solid approach. And because adultery's involved," she added, "we can push to have her denied alimony altogether." I nodded slowly, letting that sink in. No spousal support. That would matter. Losing half of what I built would sting, but if I could tilt the outcome, I might walk away with more than just my dignity. "Do you have any hard proof of the affair?" she asked. "Texts? Photos? Anything concrete?" "Not yet," I admitted. "Just word of mouth from co-workers, nothing that'll hold up in court. And I know that's not enough. I'm prepared to take this as far as I need to. The thought of hiring a private investigator has been circling in my mind, especially with that overnight business trip looming ahead. I already have the itinerary, including the hotel they're slated to stay at for the conference." "That's a clever approach," Linda nodded in agreement. "If we manage to obtain photos or video evidence of the two of them entering the same hotel room and spending the night together, it would be compelling proof in court, undeniable and humiliating for them both. That kind of evidence can really push negotiations in your favor," she added. I felt a cold, quiet sense of gratification rise in me. That would be ideal. "Now," she continued, "let's talk about the other man, James Carter. Our state still allows civil claims for alienation of affection. In other words, I could bring a lawsuit against him, as the wronged spouse, for deliberately interfering in my marriage. It's essentially a legal claim for the emotional destruction of a relationship. I've heard of those cases, I said, struggling not to grin at the possibility. I want to go through with it. I want to take him for everything he has. Linda gave me a curious look, one brow arched at the intensity in my voice. That's understandable. Just keep in mind, these cases aren't guaranteed wins. Outcomes vary, especially unless the defendant is wealthy or the circumstances are particularly damning. James's father has money, but what about James himself? Hard to say for sure, I admitted. He's in a senior role at his father's dealership. Probably earns a solid salary. He might even have access to family wealth, inheritances, trusts, something like that. But he's definitely not scraping by. She nodded thoughtfully, tapping her pen against the notepad. We can go ahead with filing the claim. Even the threat of such a lawsuit can be powerful leverage. A lot of these never make it to court because the parties want to avoid public embarrassment. And since their affair started at work, we can't ignore that morals clause you mentioned in their employment contracts. If Carter Ford has rules against internal relationships or any behavior that reflects poorly on the company, then both James and your wife could be in breach. I leaned forward. Could that be used to our advantage legally? Not directly in divorce proceedings, she explained, but it's still useful. For instance, we can send a formal letter to James's father, the dealership owner, outlining what's happening and pointing to the company's ethics policy. That might trigger disciplinary action, possibly even firing James. It would also strengthen our case for alienation of affection, proving their actions are frowned upon even in a professional context. I couldn't hold back a slight smirk. The thought of James losing his job, fired by his own father because of this mess, gave me a savage sense of satisfaction. Let's do it, I said firmly. Every bit of it. I want them both to face real consequences, on every level. Linda chuckled quietly. You came to the right person. I'm known for being relentless when it matters. She opened her calendar. Let's map out a game plan. I'll begin drafting the divorce petition and the alienation lawsuit today, and I'll get my private investigator involved immediately. You said you know the timing of their trip? Yes, I confirmed. It's the second weekend of next month, Thursday through Saturday in Cleveland. I even know the hotel and the exact dates. I got the details from someone with inside access. I handed her a small slip of paper with the information. Perfect, she said, scanning the note. We'll have the investigator positioned and ready to document everything. In the meantime, we can also have him monitor them locally, see if they're meeting up before the trip. The more we gather, the better our leverage, especially if we're trying to pressure James into a settlement. She looked up again. Once we have enough to go on, we'll proceed with serving the legal documents. I recommend delivering your wife's papers at her office. It sends a strong message. It's serious, and it might even create some social pressure on her and James. And James? I asked. We can serve him at his workplace too, she replied. Or if you're looking for maximum impact, we could wait until they're on that trip and serve them both there. Just imagine their romantic weekend shattered by legal notices. The thought made me laugh. The audacity of it, confronting them in the middle of their secret getaway. Linda gave me a knowing look. Tempting, isn't it? But there's a trade-off, she cautioned. Waiting means holding off for 3 more weeks, and I get the sense you're eager to move sooner. I tightened my hand into a fist, the tension pulsing just under my skin. You're right. I want to act now, but I also want this to land hard, in every legal way possible. Linda nodded slowly. We don't want to give them a heads up. If they suspect we're closing in, they might cover their tracks or alter their plans. The best outcome would be catching them in the act, then striking quickly, with everything we've got. By the following day, the conference was expected to hand us bulletproof proof, but there was a chance we could act even sooner, if the circumstances tipped in our favor. This week might prove pivotal, depending on what the private investigator turned up. If he managed to catch them at the motel, maybe as early as tomorrow or Thursday, we might already have the leverage needed to move ahead. Still, there was a certain poetry in serving the papers during the conference. Almost symbolic, provided we could shield the kids from any immediate emotional fallout. And that brought up the tougher issue, how and when to break it to them. Linda, ever gentle but firm, reminded me that the final call on that was largely mine, though she'd be there to guide me when the time came. The mention of the children tightened something in my chest. I hadn't truly processed that part yet, but I nodded faintly. I'd handle it carefully, probably after Lauren had been served and was out of the house. Understood, Linda said, closing her notepad with a crisp snap. Top priority, secure solid proof ASAP. Then we move ahead with both the divorce and the civil suit. She continued, next, we address the professional consequences she might face. A strategically timed message to her father, or HR at Carter Ford, could put pressure on multiple fronts. Exactly, I said, the quiet satisfaction I felt starting to harden into determination. We moved on to logistics, the paperwork I'd need to gather for the divorce, financial documents, joint account details, the mortgage records, and so on. Linda also suggested I consider discreetly moving some funds from our shared savings into a separate account before filing. That way, Lauren couldn't clean it out. She warned me to avoid violating any temporary financial restrictions that would come into play once the process officially began. Until those filings were submitted, I had some leeway to protect assets. When I left her office, I carried a folder of forms, and for the first time in weeks, a clear sense of direction. I had a plan, and Linda was exactly the kind of ally I needed to execute it. Before heading to work that late morning, I made one crucial stop, the HR department at my own company. I scheduled a private conversation with my manager, Larry Coleman, and explained that I might need unplanned time off in the coming weeks due to serious family matters. Without revealing much, I hinted that it was related to a divorce and asked for confidentiality. Larry gave my shoulder a firm pat and assured me I had his full support. I could take time off as needed, or even work remotely if things got messy. That gesture of trust meant more than I expected. The last thing I needed was workplace uncertainty added to everything else unraveling around me. By Monday afternoon, Linda had already mobilized the private investigator. I was at my desk, mechanically pushing through tasks, when a message lit up my phone. PI's on the move. We'll keep you posted. A grim sense of satisfaction stirred in me. James and Lauren likely thought they were operating under the radar. They probably had no idea they might already be in someone's lens, from a parking lot, a corridor, a motel curtain. Monday passed without incident. Not surprising. It was early. But by Tuesday morning, I was restless, riding a current of electric unease. Lauren left for work as if nothing had changed, planting a light kiss on my cheek, a daily charade. I received it without reaction, hiding everything behind a polished mask. At the office, I couldn't concentrate. My mind was elsewhere, locked on the invisible developments possibly unfolding at that very moment. Then, in the early afternoon, my phone buzzed. Linda again. River Park Inn, 1:17 p.m., entered room. Got them on camera. Left at 2:45. We've got exit footage too. A follow-up came seconds later. We're solid. Still might grab something even more damning at the conference, unless you want to go now. Call me later. I stared at the messages, feeling the air leave my lungs. This was it. Irrefutable proof. Concrete timestamps. Photographs. The betrayal wasn't theory anymore. It was fact. Hands trembling slightly, I typed a reply. We'll call after work. Thank you. Reality hit. While I sat in a cubicle, trying to function, my wife and my best friend had turned a motel room into a midday escape. And now, there was evidence. Unmistakable. Final. I could already picture it. The two of them slipping into that budget inn like it was routine. No shame. Maybe even excitement. My stomach turned, but I forced the rage down. Stay focused. We were almost there. That evening, I told Lauren I had to step out for an urgent work task. Instead, I drove to a quiet parking lot, killed the engine, and dialed Linda. She picked up on the first ring. "It's all there," she said, her voice brimming with purpose. "Crystal clear shots. They even kissed outside. Can you believe that? My guy caught everything." That landed harder than I expected. Publicly kissing, out in the open, as if they had nothing to hide. It felt like a dagger twisting. "They really think I have no clue," I said quietly. "So, what's our next move?" Linda's tone stayed steady. "We've got more than enough. Divorce and alienation of affection, slam dunk. Just say when." Still, if I could just hold off until the conference, we'd have a real shot at catching them in the act. Cornered mid-affair, no room for excuses. That timing would bolster the legal case from both angles. Striking while they were in transit would maximize the impact. I gave it serious thought. It was hard not to. My fury urged immediate action. I wanted them to feel the hit without delay, but logic prevailed. A couple more weeks of restraint would only tighten our grip. Part of me almost delighted in the mental picture. The two of them, carefree, arriving for a romantic getaway, only to be blindsided by legal ambush. "I can wait," I said, deliberately. "It won't be easy, but I can do it." Then I added, "What should we do with what we uncovered today?" "I'll finish drafting the complaints and bundle in the new evidence," she replied. "You'll need to sign off on some documents, but we can line that up, and we need to decide how to serve them. There are a few options. One is to have a local process server deliver the documents at the hotel during the conference. It's a sensitive moment, but I've handled tougher," she continued. "Alternatively, we could serve your wife at her job on Thursday before she departs. As for him, we could target either his workplace or his home. Still," she paused, "there's a certain poetry to them being served together during their little getaway." "I like that idea," I admitted, the scene already playing out in my mind. "Let's serve them at the hotel. I want the timing just right, so the entire weekend gets wrecked." Linda let out a quiet laugh. "Revenge is always better when it's done legally. I'll coordinate with a Cleveland firm to have process servers ready with the packets. They'll likely be served at different times," she added. "Maybe Lauren gets hers at breakfast. James gets hit during one of the breakout sessions. Either way, they won't forget it." That vision gave me a dark, satisfying sense of closure. I pictured Lauren opening what she assumed was a welcome packet or conference guide, only to discover divorce papers paired with undeniable evidence of betrayal. I imagined James being pulled aside, confused, only to receive a lawsuit in front of colleagues. The shock, the disgrace, they deserved every second of it. We ended the call after handling the final logistics. I arranged for the kids to stay with my mother that weekend, keeping them insulated from the fallout when Lauren came home. I also booked a locksmith to change the locks early that Sunday morning, just before I'd tell Lauren she no longer lived there. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a strange balancing act between routine and readiness. Outwardly, nothing had changed. I sat at the dinner table as always, made small talk with Lauren about errands and work, clapped at Eli's baseball game, even stood beside her when he hit a double. We laughed now and then, but behind her smile, I saw only the illusion. Every shared moment was just camouflage for what was coming. Quietly, I removed every key financial document from our shared files, bank records, the mortgage, car titles, insurance paperwork, and stored them in a private safe deposit box under my name. I rerouted my paycheck to an account Lauren couldn't access. I also discreetly informed the kids' teachers, asking them to keep an eye out for any behavioral changes in case the household atmosphere shifted. I wanted to protect the kids, to shelter them from the mess, but I was fully committed to making sure they stayed with me. Lauren would always be their mother, and I wouldn't stop her from being part of their lives. But I had no intention of letting her drag them into whatever fantasy world she and James thought they were building, assuming he even wanted that. Once the truth came out, they might just implode. One could hope. As far as Lauren could tell, things between us seemed to be on the mend. Maybe I was that convincing, Or maybe she was just too consumed by the affair to notice the cold distance in my eyes. She might have taken my calm for acceptance, or cluelessness. In reality, it was just the calm before the storm. The night before she left for the conference, I noticed her old anxiety creeping back. She flitted around the room, fussing over outfits, double-checking her bag. "Do you think the gray pantsuit's too dressy for the conference?" she asked, holding it up for inspection. I gave an indifferent shrug. "Whatever you feel good in. You'll look great either way." She smiled, then leaned in for a gentle kiss. "Thanks for being so supportive about this trip, Daniel. After everything we've been through, I really appreciate it." I kissed her back, hollow inside. "Of course, it's work. Just shoot me a text when you land so I know you're safe." She looked touched, mistaking my words for care when they were really cover. "I will. It's just a couple of nights. I'll be back before you know it." "I'll be fine with the kids," I assured her. I had already arranged for my mother to stay the night, partly as a cover story, partly because I knew the emotional aftermath wouldn't wait for her return. She rested her head gently against my shoulder. "When I get back, maybe we could spend a day together. That new place by the river looks really nice." It had been far too long since we'd had an evening just for ourselves. I swallowed the rising bitterness and slipped an arm around her waist. "Yeah, let's do that," I said. Letting her believe we still had something worth saving, if only a quiet dinner, felt like a small cruelty, just barely. Sleep never came that Wednesday night. I lay awake beside her, unmoving, listening to Lauren's steady breathing. The thought that she might not sleep here again after the week ended loomed heavy. But it wasn't grief that sat in my chest, it was anticipation. 2 more days, I reminded myself. Just 2 more, and I could stop pretending. On Thursday morning, I helped carry her luggage out to James's car. He had the nerve to come to our home to pick her up. They were headed to the same conference after all. From the front step, I watched him hop out of the car, waving like we were old buddies. "Hey there, Daniel," he called out, beaming. "I'll return her in one piece," he joked. "We'll try not to work her too hard." He shot Lauren a grin and tossed her suitcase into the trunk. She laughed, then turned to me for a parting hug. Every instinct told me to pull away from her touch. Instead, I hugged her tightly, never dropping the act with James watching. "Drive safe," I said, my tone warm. "Good luck with the conference, honey." "Thanks," she murmured, looking up at me with eyes that held both guilt and affection. Maybe her conscience wasn't completely dead yet. "I'll call you tonight," she promised. "We'll be all right," I told her, forcing a smile. "You'll do great." She kissed me gently, and I even shook James's hand, exchanging meaningless pleasantries, all while fully aware of what that hand had been doing behind my back. Then they were gone, Lauren blowing kisses to the kids as they pedaled their bikes around the driveway. As the car rounded the corner and vanished, the last of my emotions drained away. The smile I wore then was hollow and ice cold. It had begun. I checked my watch. 7:30 a.m. Everything was unfolding exactly on schedule. The process servers in Cleveland were lined up to deliver the paperwork Friday morning. Linda had made sure every piece was ready. By lunchtime the next day, Lauren and her companion would each be served, divorce papers in hand, along with damning evidence of their affair. And by Sunday, the final step would be complete, ensuring Lauren no longer had a home to return to. Thursday, I kept busy. Got the kids off to school, faked a day's work, coordinated with Linda to confirm all the details. The private investigator was still tracking them at the conference, just in case. We didn't expect discretion on their part, though. In fact, we hoped for more, some hotel room photos to sweeten the file of evidence. Friday arrived humid and overcast. I'd taken a personal day to prepare for the fallout. At 8:15 a.m., my phone vibrated. A message came through from an unknown number, likely the PI or one of the process servers. "Package delivered to LM at Hilton Garden Inn, Cleveland, 8:07 a.m. Subject appeared shaken. Second package handed to JC. Via conference registration at 8:10 a.m. It was done. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for months. They had it, the paperwork. Lauren, right now, would be staring at the first lines of the divorce filing, her betrayal with James Carter laid bare in precise legal language. And James? He'd be holding a civil suit naming him directly for the damage he'd caused, along with a warning that his father's business would be notified of his behavior. I wished I could have seen it unfold. Lauren's expression collapsing, her fingers trembling, James panicking as he fumbled for his phone. Would he even know who to call? Unlikely. The fantasy they had built together had just collapsed around them, spectacularly and without warning. Then, my phone lit up, Lauren's number. It buzzed where it sat on the counter. I didn't answer. Another call, then a flurry of texts. I skimmed through them. Daniel, what is this? Please talk to me. We need to talk. Oh my God, you knew? Daniel, I'm so sorry. Please, just call me, I can explain. And finally, I'm coming home. Please don't do anything drastic. We can fix this. Reading her frantic messages, I felt a strange and unexpected stillness settle over me. She still hadn't grasped it. Thought maybe there was room for explanation, for patching things up. But that door had closed for good. I didn't reply to her, just shot a quick message to my mom, who'd had the kids since Thursday night. Keep them one more night. Love you. I didn't want Emma or Eli anywhere near what was about to unfold when Lauren arrived. As for James, radio silence. I wasn't holding my breath. That relationship was beyond repair. If we spoke again, it would be through attorneys, cold, formal, and likely in a courtroom. That afternoon, I wrapped up the final steps of what I'd planned. At exactly 3 p.m., the locksmith showed up and swapped out every exterior lock. I also reset the garage keypad, just to be sure. Lauren's things, clothes, makeup, framed memories, had already been boxed up earlier in the week. Everything was stacked neatly in the garage, sealed in plastic tubs. There was a strange sense of closure in erasing her presence from the place we once called home. By 5, I figured they'd be back. That conference blew up early that morning. Odds were they'd made a beeline for the car soon after. Sure enough, a little before 6, I heard tires screech onto the driveway. I walked to the living room and pulled back the curtain. James's BMW sat parked out front. He stayed inside. Lauren got out from the passenger side, visibly shaken, her steps uneven. She rushed to the door and tried the handle. It didn't budge, of course not. I opened it just far enough for the chain to stay in place. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Her eyes were red and wild. "Daniel, please open the door. We need to talk. I got the papers. You're divorcing me. And suing James." Her voice trembled with fear. Behind her, James stepped out of the car, far less smug than usual. That, at least, was a small victory. "Everything you need to know is in those documents," I said coldly. "And the exhibits. I imagine they made things pretty clear." Tears spilled as she brought her hands together like she was praying. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." I didn't let her finish. "But you did. And worse, you hurt our children. That's not something you come back from." Her body shook as she cried. "Please, can't we talk about it? For the kids, maybe we can—" That did it. The rage flared hot in my chest. "Don't use them to buy sympathy. Don't act like their well-being mattered to you when you were betraying them too." She staggered back, like the words had hit her. James was on the porch now, his face caught between guilt and arrogance. "Isn't this a bit much?" he said, trying to recover his usual tone. "Dragging this into the workplace? Suing me? Come on, Daniel, let's be adults." I faced him fully. The words I'd rehearsed for weeks suddenly felt unnecessary, so I kept it simple. "You were never my friend. You're a fraud, a coward, and a disgrace. You've earned every bit of this fallout. Now get off my property." He looked like he wanted to lash out, but he stopped short. Maybe he remembered the assault charge, still pending, from when he blindsided me. My lawyer and I had agreed to keep it dormant unless he stepped out of line again. Think of it as leverage. Lauren's sobs grew frantic. Please don't do this. Don't take my kids away. Once, that might have broken me. Not anymore. This isn't something I did to you, I said quietly. You'll still have visitation, under terms laid out by my attorney. But they're staying here. That decision's final. She collapsed inward, palms covering her face as she wept. James stood beside her, clearly realizing this wasn't fixable. No apology could undo what they'd done. I closed the door part way. Goodbye, Lauren. Then I turned to James and added, and goodbye to you. One more thing. Have a word with your dad. My attorney contacted him this morning about your contract violations and character clause issues. You might want to polish your resume. His expression drained of all color. I shut the door and didn't look back. Lauren screamed, her voice a storm of fury and heartbreak, and pounded the door with her fist. I turned the lock one final time and walked away, my chest hammering with anxiety. From the window, I saw James approach. He reached for her gently, murmuring something I couldn't make out. He was trying to soothe her, urging her toward the car. She shook her head fiercely, unwilling, but eventually, after a tense standoff, he got her into the passenger seat. Before they pulled out, he shot a bitter, blazing glare at the house, a place he had once ruled and now had lost. Then they drove away. I let out a shaky breath. The sudden quiet was surreal. For the first time in years, the house felt like it belonged solely to me. I sat down on the bottom step, the full weight of everything hitting me at once. I had done what I needed to do. The most important blows had landed. What came next would be complex. Separation always is, wrapped in emotional debris and legal messes. But in that moment, I felt a hollow sense of victory. This was the fallout, the beginning of Chapter 7. I exhaled again, dragging my hands over my face. As the adrenaline wore off, waves of grief and hurt began to wash over me, softening the edges of my resolve. But I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. I had 2 kids, and they deserved the truth, from me, not anyone else. When my mother brought Emma and Eli back that evening, I braced myself for the most gut-wrenching task yet, telling them their parents were separating. We sat on the couch together, and right away, they picked up on the tension. My expression gave it away. Lauren wasn't there, and they noticed. I inhaled slowly, trying to steady my voice. There's something important we need to talk about, I said, barely holding it together. Your mom and we're going to be living in different homes for a while. Emma's eyes widened. She was perceptive. She grasped the meaning before I could even finish. You mean you're getting divorced? She asked, her voice faint. Eli, only 9, looked between us, his face clouded with confusion and fear. Mom's not coming back? He whispered. I reached out and held them close, wrapping an arm around each of them. Your mom made choices that hurt me and hurt our family, I said gently, doing my best not to break. We can't stay married, but this isn't your fault. Not at all. We love you more than anything. That will never change. Emma's eyes filled with tears, and I saw something stir in her expression, a flicker of understanding mixed with pain. It's because of Mr. Carter, isn't it? She asked, her voice cracking. My heart sank. I had tried so hard to shield them from specifics, but she had picked up more than I thought. I gave her a small, sorrowful nod. Yes, honey, that's right. Her chin trembled as a tear slid down her cheek. She turned away, her jaw tight. Eli, meanwhile, broke down into sobs, collapsing into my chest. I don't want Mom to go, he cried. That shattered me. My own tears spilled over, burning and silent. I held them both as tightly as I could, their bodies shaking in my arms. I know, buddy, I murmured. I know this hurts. I'm so sorry. We stayed like that for what felt like forever. I kept repeating the same promises, that they'd still see their mother, that I would always be here, that we would get through it together. Eventually, their crying eased into quiet sniffles. I got up, grabbed some tissues, and gently wiped Eli's face, then Emma's, just as I used to when they were little. "I'm here," I kept saying. "I'm not going anywhere. We'll be okay." They curled up against me on the couch, exhausted. And even in the middle of all that sadness, I felt something like relief. The secret was out. I hadn't realized how much pretending had drained me. That night, I coaxed them into eating a bit, then tucked them into my bed. They didn't want to sleep alone, and that was perfectly fine. Later, the phone rang. Lauren, as expected. She left a voicemail, her voice thick with tears, apologizing to the kids and telling them how much she loved them, promising they'd see her soon. I didn't let them listen. Not yet. Instead, I sent her a message saying the kids were safe and that we'd talk about visitation soon. I needed a few days for all of us to breathe, for her to pull herself together. The last thing they needed was to absorb more of her pain right now. By Monday, our conversations were strictly through lawyers. Lauren had moved back in with her parents for the time being. We agreed she'd see the kids over the weekend. Telling them had been the hardest moment of my life, but from that day forward I made a quiet vow to build something steady, warm, and whole for them, no matter what it took. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. In the weeks that followed, the consequences unfolded just as I'd predicted. Lauren didn't contest the divorce. Through her attorney, she accepted the major terms without resistance. She knew the leverage was gone. We ultimately agreed to joint legal custody of the children, though I remained their primary caregiver, responsible for the bulk of their daily lives. Her visitation was limited to every other weekend, a schedule that initially made the kids uneasy. She waived any claim to spousal support. The division of property went smoothly. She walked away with a fair portion of our savings, and the agreement that I'd purchase her share of the house, allowing me to keep it as a stable home for the children and myself. James's downfall, in contrast, unfolded in dramatic fashion. His father reacted with explosive anger, partly humiliated, partly afraid of legal consequences, and fired him immediately from his job at Carter Ford. Word spread that Richard Carter had screamed, "You've ruined your future, you fool," before physically removing his son from the premises. I filed a lawsuit against James for alienation of affection, which began progressing through the court system. He initially dismissed the suit as laughable and antiquated, but when confronted with indisputable proof of the affair and the threat of dealership employees testifying about his behavior, his lawyers quickly pushed for a settlement. Eventually, he caved, agreeing to a substantial payout to avoid the ordeal of a public trial. It wasn't the $5 million I had initially pursued, but it was enough to cover the kids' future tuition and eliminate our mortgage. That, in itself, was deeply gratifying. And more than that, James's reputation in Brookville completely collapsed. He slipped out of town with as little noise as possible, hoping to start fresh somewhere far from the scandal he'd sparked. Lauren didn't walk away untouched either. Alongside the breakdown of our marriage and her diminished parental role, she also lost her job. In a small town like ours, news travels fast. When both the general manager and his assistant vanished in the wake of a scandal, it didn't take long for people to connect the dots. Carter Ford let her go quietly, citing violations of company conduct. I was told Richard Carter gave her a sharp reprimand, softened only slightly by the fact that he'd known her for years. Still, the outcome was clear. She was unemployed and unlikely to find work locally anytime soon. A few months later, I took Emma and Eli to a lake not far from town for a fishing trip. The sky was bright, the air crisp, a morning that reminded me how good it felt to simply be alive. Helping Eli reel in a small sunfish, I felt an unfamiliar sense of peace settle in me. The worst of the pain had passed. The legal battles were winding down, and my kids were right there with me, laughing, looking ahead. I hadn't planned to raise them alone in my 40s, but in truth, I'd already been doing most of it myself for some time, while Lauren's attention drifted elsewhere. Now I was fully present, without resentment, witut pause. The three of us, four, counting their grandmother, were beginning to find a new rhythm, a new normal. Emma stayed polite but distant with her mother, her faith clearly shaken. Eli, still young enough to believe in second chances, was more forgiving, though for a while he'd wait crying, afraid she might disappear again. To her credit, Lauren was trying. She was in therapy, sticking to her scheduled visits, and putting effort into reconnecting with the kids. Maybe, with enough time, the pieces would begin to fall back into place. I clung to that hope, for the children's sake more than my own. As for James, I hadn't spoken to him since the day I slammed the door in his face, and I had no plans to ever break that silence. That chapter of my life was closed. In the still moments, there were flashes of grief, not for her, but for the life I thought we were building, for the family dinners that would never quite feel the same, for the reality that my children would grow up splitting their time between two homes. But those feelings were growing rarer. In the end, what mattered most had survived. We had endured the worst of it, and we were still standing. By meeting the crisis head-on and shielding my children from its worst effects, I uncovered a resilience in myself I hadn't known I possessed. The road ahead didn't look like the one I had mapped out years ago, but it was still a road filled with possibility, and in the only battle that ever truly counted, we had won. Our story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed the way I tell stories, head over to my channel and check out my other videos. May the force be with you. See you soon, my friend. We rolled out immediate reforms, tightening every control system. I promoted someone from inside the company, a loyal, trustworthy team member, to serve as interim CFO.